today's event. I'm also trying to convince myself that the size of this chair isn't intended to say anything about my height. So this session today will introduce all of you to some exciting new innovations coming out of the digital health startup community. And we will encourage all of your interaction and big thinking. The Milken Institute and its Faster Cures Center are keenly focused on fostering innovation in key sectors by helping to provide entrepreneurs with the tools that they need to succeed. Sometimes this might mean ensuring that startups have important access to capital. Or, as with today, it's ensuring that entrepreneurs have access to key stakeholders and mentors who can help to pressure test certain business ideas and models. For those of you who are familiar, and let's see if our slides are working here. For those of you who are familiar with the lean startup method, it is critical that innovators frequently and early on seek feedback from the ultimate end users to be sure that they can incorporate that feedback into their business models or concepts. As Eric Ries, who's the creator of the lean startup methodology, notes, too many startups begin with an idea for a product that they think people want. They then spend months, sometimes years, perfecting that product without ever showing the product, even in a very rudimentary form, to the prospective customer. When they fail to reach broad uptake from customers, it is often because they never spoke to a prospective customer and determined whether or not the product was interesting. Well, our goal today is to speed up those feedback loops to ensure that entrepreneurs can maximize the impact of their digital health innovations on biomedical research and involved patient groups. To help us do that, we have an incredible panel with us today, and these do represent the key stakeholders and mentors who can help inform the product development process for many of our businesses. For each presentation, we will have one floating panelist who will represent a specific patient group. Our panelists here do not represent their specific companies, but bring with them their substantive subject matter expertise. After each presentation, we will hear from our panelists who will pose reactions and questions to our entrepreneurs. We will then open it up to Q&A, so as soon as you have a question, please raise your hand. One of our staffers will come to you, and then you'll have about 30 seconds to pose your question and make sure we can stay on time here. So with that, let me please turn to our panelists for just brief introductions and also to give us a sense of your specific interests in this space. Joining us, we have Esther Dyson, and I'm going here from right to left, Einar Sawyer, Craig Lipsett, and Todd Shearer. So with that, Esther, we'll start with you, and please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your interests in this area.
Okay, I'm a longtime angel investor who got increasingly less interested in concert-finding apps and more interesting in things that would actually do something useful. And even within the space of so-called healthcare, I'm now focusing more on health.
Einar.
My name's Einar Sawyer from UCSF. I'm an orthopedist, but I've been involved in innovation in device and digital health for about 10 years and lead efforts there in innovation from the front lines and also advise at outside entities as well. And I'm particularly interested in the power of the multidisciplinary approach and the hybrid vigor that comes from bringing people from different sectors together, and also very motivated to help train more cross-pollinated individuals as we go along.
Craig.
Hi, I'm Craig Lipsett. I work at Pfizer. I lead a function around applying innovation in our development programs. Before I started that at Pfizer, I was in their corporate venture group looking at different investment opportunities around health technology. Outside of Pfizer, I'm a mentor at Blueprint Health downtown here in New York. And my interests are really to work with entrepreneurs to help appreciate the opportunities in clinical research and R&D. It tends to be a bit less glamorous and sexy than many of the other consumer-facing opportunities in healthcare. So I enjoy the opportunity to work with them to see where their technology and approach can impact that space.
All right, thanks. And Todd.
Todd Shearer from the Michael J. Fox Foundation. My interest in this area is really in the ability to utilize technology to better empower patients, to have more information about their own disease, and then to figure out how to best intersect the technology for research and development of new therapies and patient care.
Great. Okay, well, thank you. And so with that, let's get into our presentation. So first, we have Nori Daroga from Geppetto Avatar. Geppetto Avatar is a member of the Health XL Incubator. So with that, Nori. have to hold two things here. So.
Thank you. Very happy to be here, and standing room only crowd. You'd think it was my parole hearing or something. I'm the CEO of Geppetto, and I'll be talking about our avatar, Sophie, who is going to be the next member of your healthcare team. Let's see if this works. Aha. I'm assuming she's up there. Okay. So you will see a little depiction of Sophie there, and she is our avatar. And you will notice that she has the ability to hear, think, speak, see, move, but most importantly, to feel. So this is an avatar that actually gathers emotion, and I'll talk about how she does that. And then as you go past in those circles, I'd like to pay attention to assessment, the assess, react, and observe. So she's a wonderful observation platform because she's able to use the microphone, she's able to use the camera, and because she's on a mobile device, either an iPhone or an iPad in this case, she can pick up all of the gestures that your hands are making. So this is something that we feel is a highly linguistic interface with devices. And our first application is in healthcare. And I was visiting one of those famous venture capital firms in Silicon Valley who said, healthcare, innovation, they're not in the same sentence. Well, I think they are, and this is one of the harder problems to solve, so I'm very excited to be here. Okay. So here's the platform I'm going to walk you through from the bottom up. And really, if you think about how Sophie interacts, it's very similar to how we as human beings interact. You start with the brain, and there are a number of modules in there that you'll see. I'll talk a little bit about IBM Watson, which is one of the brains that Sophie is currently dating. In fact, she likes him enough that she took his last name. And so she tells me he has a 3-second response time, which is a lot faster than my response to my wife when she gives me a list. So anyway, he said he was in charge of all the jokes, but he handed them off to me.
I set a low bar.
What you'll see that's proprietary for us is the sensory, and we've built the ears, nose, mouth, all of the stuff that happens, the biometrics. So what Sophie is able to do is she's able to use semantics, biometrics, and semiotics to try to pick up your emotion, and she triangulates that. And as you know, technology isn't really the key here. It's the understanding of people. So psychology, anthropology, cultural differences between people are all that we need to kind of mix into this to make Sophie effective. And then she has a decision-making ability, as well as an ability to pick up biases. So all of us have a confirmation bias. When we walk in, we kind of ask questions to confirm our thesis. Can you imagine a physician walking in and talking to you, and they've taken a look at your chart, and very quickly, and they're going to ask you the questions to confirm what they believe is the diagnosis of what's wrong with you, and that's what leads to misdiagnosis. So if you're able to train a physician, the person who's asking questions, to really deal with that confirmation bias, you're able to really eliminate it. And that's been shown by John Hopkins. They have an algorithm and a protocol to do that. What we do is we use gaming techniques that in 30 minutes does what takes John Hopkins to do in 30 days. So, and then finally, as a communication device, she's got the linguistic, the graphical, and very contextual information behind her. So this is what it looks like on a tablet. And I'd like to focus on the things on the right there. So she recognizes emotion, and she uses the camera, the microphone, and sensors. I was told that since this is a very public forum that I should not do a demo, but I do have my little iPad, and if you're interested, I'll show you how she kind of walks through this. She's designed to build empathy. And what's really important about that is if you have an avatar that doesn't understand your emotion, doesn't respond in a manner that you feel is appropriate, you will not continue to use the avatar. So she's got an empathetic loop that allows her to figure out your emotion, and within the seconds that it takes for her to do that, she comes back and exhibits emotion to you. And we track both, so you're able to see what the person's emotion is as compared to the system's emotion. She's able to take real-time data from the web, so if you've got air quality index or Twitter feeds, which seem to be pretty prevalent today, she can pick that up. So can you imagine if you had a blood sugar level of 214 in the morning and you told your doctor, I don't know why, and Sophie's able to point out that you tweeted from the bar at 1:30 in the morning, that might be relevant. And then finally, you'll see that little octagon chart that has the 8 emotions that we capture. So our use case that we're presenting here is on Parkinson's, and that's one of the reasons why the Michael J. Fox Foundation is here with us. We've worked out a use case that goes through the PDQ, the questionnaire, 39 questions. And then she also has the ability to just have a conversation with you and talk to you and get your feelings on Parkinson's. And we built this in 45 days, which is kind of interesting. So we're looking for external funding so that we're able to actually make this come true in a pilot with somebody who can test this and provide us with the desired outcomes and data. So with that, I will turn it over to.
Thank you very much. Now you can hold on to that because we're going to first field some questions and reactions from our panelists. So Todd, why don't we start with you? Reactions to the presentation and any questions that you have for Nori.
Sure. I think it's very interesting because obviously a disease like Parkinson's, people have mobility challenges. So figuring out a way to meet them where they are, I think, is a really important goal. One of the questions I have for a disease like Parkinson's that is difficult to diagnose even by an expert, whether what their bias or not.
Right.
How do you build in whatever the algorithms are to compare how accurate this work would be?
So right now what we're doing is we're working with assessments only. So from an efficiency standpoint, if you have somebody who's already diagnosed and you go through the different symptoms and the different stages of Parkinson's, you have a lot of interaction with people, nurses in particular, where they're doing the assessment. So this is used as an assessment tool initially. But as you're aware, we've worked with Max Little, and there's a lot of data as well as quantified data that shows that you can pick up Parkinson's through voice, and voice is a muscle and degradation. Sophie's ability to record everything over a period of time allows you to look at a progression that perhaps you couldn't if you were relying on your memory. So those are the types of things that we were looking to when we get to clinical endpoints, when you're looking to try to see whether drugs work in a cognitive area, having that data available. And it's also HIPAA compliant as well as HL7, so it feeds into the EMRs.
Right. Let's just move down the line here, Craig.
Great. So,
And actually, if you have questions in the audience, you can start raising hands. We'll make sure we have someone come close to you so that we're ready to go when we get to that portion. But please.
thanks. So as I mentioned in the introduction, I work in R&D, and I spend a lot of time around clinical trials. And there are 2 use cases around there that come to mind. One is as we look to inform patients about research, and there's a dearth of decision support tools to help them, whether it's in the clinic when they're considering a study or all the way through to consent. And I can certainly see a platform that's interactive in this way being very constructive for helping a patient in that time. The other use case that you've hit on here is around PROs and patient-reported outcomes, which I think is an interesting place to think about the technology. It's a challenging one because instruments are validated based on how the data is captured. And if it was validated on paper and you want to move it to an app, that's another effort. And if you want to move it then to, say, an avatar, that might be yet another effort for each instrument. But I also wonder, and I'll flip this back to you as a question here, have you gotten any feedback about concern about the emotional response of the avatar? If it is successful there in engaging around empathy, could it skew or bias data, where we're very concerned about capturing, say, very objective feedback from the patient? How is your pain? How is your, say, emotional state? If the avatar is really successful at being empathetic, will that shift how the patient is responding?
It's possible, but if you start down the journey of how we interact as two people right now staring at each other and we're communicating in a verbal as well as a nonverbal manner, and that's what Sophie's capturing. And what her empathetic loop is really to make sure that if you're crying, she doesn't say, oh, that's really good. So other than that, she's not trying to influence your answers. And you have all of the video and the audio that's there. So you're able to continue to look at it for 6 more years.
That's really good.
Well, I'm really excited about this. I think that I started as a physical therapist before becoming an orthopedist and worked with Parkinson's patients. And our clinic tests in many fields don't do a good job of really assessing in subtle ways how patients are functioning in their own environments, or what I call in their life flow. And I think tests that reach out into life flow aspects are really valuable. Obviously, there'll be a lot of interpretation that's going to need to be done to see what's valuable and how you weight those factors, but this is wonderful. I think the questions I have are, one is, as she's doing her assessment, is she able to target recommendations even around adaptive technologies, because the tremors for Parkinson's patients make the computer interface sometimes really challenging. There are technologies to adapt, and she might observe sometimes and then be able to make a suggestion based on that.
So one of the things we use quite a bit is the GPU that happens to be in the portable device that you're using. So right now we have it on a tablet. It's going to a smartphone in 2 weeks. So the ability to pick up that motion is part of the interpretation of communication. So
the other one is along the same lines, but more on a patient engagement aspect. And there's some great human-computer interface organizations and studies, and one done in an older population tested in older avatar versus a younger one, and there were actually differences in the older ones seemed to get more trust as far as intelligence. The younger ones they felt safer with, but there was a gender difference as well.
Right.
So I wondered if you're incorporating those things.
yeah, so that's why we have anthropologists, because if you take a look at all of that, what you just described is about the study of human behavior. And there's something called the uncanny valley with avatars, which says that if it's too close to a human, it's creepy, and if it's too cartoonish, it's not believable. So my business partner actually wrote 4 books on the uncanny valley, which I don't really understand at that depth, but I know it's a place I need to avoid. So, but it is certainly very true. And so we will have multiple avatars with gender, features, skin color, all of that kind of stuff. But what's really important is that the principles in which we did the rigging of the avatar continue on, so that you build something that's going to be acceptable and build the trust, the relationship. Yep.
Great.
Esther?
Okay,
Yeah,
Esther.
so as an investor who's seen a lot of things, my question is kind of focused on this uncanny valley. You've been working on this for 6 months, or you will work on it for 6 months?
Well, we've only worked on it for 6 months. We actually are a company that's about 18 months old.
Yeah.
The study that people within our organization extends over 15 years of
Yeah.
research.
Okay, because I'm honestly somewhat skeptical. There's Siri, there are all these
Right.
so-called understanding things. They're all pretty lame. They're okay because nobody thinks they're real people. And I mean, I would much rather have something that did a few things well, including some of the assessments and so forth. I'm not sure by piling in the avatar and all the different capabilities, you aren't setting yourselves up for being insufficiently good on any of them. I mean, all these pieces sound really, really great, but putting them together in a whole product with the challenge of that uncanny valley, which is deep.
Right. So you'll be the one I'll do the demo for first, Esther.
Okay, great.
And I think what you're actually going to experience is that all of the avatars that you've mentioned try to do everything for everybody, right? These are contextual avatars. So their intelligence, if you ask Siri the same series of questions that you asked Sophie, you would get very different answers. You would not get 1,700 answers like you do with WebMD or any other site that says, and you always have cancer based on these symptoms. So there is a very contextual aspect to this. So there's an avatar for COPD, there's an avatar for diabetes, there's an avatar for Parkinson's, there's one built for dementia. They have different characteristics, they have different knowledge bases. And so what IBM Watson and all of the other artificial intelligence engines do behind us is they provide the contextual answer that you're looking for, and that's the difference.
Yeah, but then so the avatar says, I'll talk to you only about Parkinson's. You can't ask me anything else, basically.
Well, you can ask her about wine too, and she does have a few answers about that. But yes, you're right. If you have Parkinson's, you're going to use the Parkinson's.
Okay.
But on your tablet, you can have 40 different avatars.
Yeah.
Let me jump in. Let me see if I can get one question from the audience before we move on to our next, so I can keep us on track.
Sure.
Do we have anyone from the audience? All right. Well, if you can all join me, a round of applause for Nori. Thank you. You can pass that baton off to the next. And thank you, Todd, as well. We'll have our next floating panelist join us.
I'll tell you a story about my mother afterwards.
It's Andrea Downing, who represents the patient community with inherited cancer. And so next up, our next presenter is Feyi Olopade with Cancer IQ. She's a member of, the organization is a member of 1776 in Washington, D.C., Rock Health, and 1871 in Chicago. So all good cities that you get to travel to. So please welcome Feyi.
Hello, and thank you very much for that introduction. So I'm here to tell you about Cancer IQ. In some of the top academic medical centers, advances in genomic sequencing technology have been able to transform cancers that used to be a death sentences into things that you survive. In the rest of the country, however, where 85% of patients are actually diagnosed and treated, outcomes are up to 20% below. Our goal is to empower every physician to close that gap and deliver those same outcomes. We've done some research, and now we understand the cause for the gap. If you're really going to incorporate genetics into cancer care, it's a very cumbersome process. You can spend time interviewing patients to identify risk factors and eligibility for testing. Then you can spend another hour processing paperwork and justifying testing. When you get the testing results back, it can take some time to interpret it, scouring literature. And lastly, designing a plan to act on this information can be time-consuming exercise with your team and with your patient. In academic settings, you have a team-based approach to this, where the oncologist is flanked by genetic counselors and nurses and others, so that they maybe spend 15 or 20 minutes talking about cancer risk factors and prevention. But in a community-based setting, where you may only have the support of a nurse, this could be a 1 to 2 hour exercise, one that one is never going to engage in. So this is what happens. They either skip the process altogether, or they refer you elsewhere. But if you're in the heartland, and the closest academic medical center is 2.5 hours away, you're not gonna get access to the right kind of care. So here's how we solve the problem. We make it easier and faster for everybody to deliver this kind of care. And we're focused on the provider. We first empower the patient to engage in this process. They can fill out a clinically relevant survey in the waiting room so that by the time they get in to see their physician, the physician already has a report of all the risk factors that are at play and what they need to do about it. They also have the justification that they need to actually get reimbursed for a genetic test and make sure that there's no anxiety about how they're going to get paid. Beyond that, we help guide them based on the results of the genetic testing. Instead of scouring literature, we give them all the answers up front so they can easily make a decision. So that where you live will no longer determine whether you live. Now, what I'm here to talk to this organization about today is our plan for the future. We not only want to help people in clinical care, but we want more patients who don't have answers to questions to be served by Cancer IQ, and to use Cancer IQ to accelerate research. And this is how we plan to do that. We want people to be able to manage their own data and change their privacy settings so that they can expose relevant information to different research organizations. So that if you don't have a big checkbook, you can donate your data to organizations that are focused on particular causes that you care about, so that we can break down research silos and save lives. Luckily, we're not starting from scratch, and here's our real ask. We're looking for funding to fund more of our pilots. Today, we have 2 pilot programs in hospitals that are going to offer Cancer IQ to over 40,000 women this year. But we want to expand that. And for the places that don't have the institutional buy-in, or they haven't gotten through the finance committee who needs an ROI projection, funding these pilots will help us generate the data that we need for people to subscribe to Cancer IQ long term. The second thing you can help us with, if you can't write a check, is to share your stories. And we really want to assemble a group of strong patient advocates who can help improve the patient experience of Cancer IQ. It's easy for the doctors, and we want it to be easy for the patients as well. And the last thing you can help us with is you can help us build your registries. There are a number of advocacy groups that would like for patients to share their data. We want to help you. We want your registries to be listed in the Cancer IQ platform so that when patients are deciding where they're going to donate their data, they're donating it to you. So join us, because we want to offer testing to everybody. We want more patients to participate in this cutting-edge genomic medicine. And we want more of these patients to be eligible to participate in research. And at the end of the day, because we're a company, we want this all to be sustainable. So join us.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So, Andrea, let's start with you. And if you can also just briefly introduce yourself, as we did before with our other panelists, and then pose your reactions and questions to Feyi.
I'm not sure. Oh, there it is.
You're live.
It's on. Okay, great. So again, my name is Andrea Downing. I am an advocate for women who carry a genetic predisposition to cancer. I co-moderate online communities worldwide of women who are navigating decisions around genetic testing and decisions that you have to make if you test positive. So I'm really excited about what Feyi is doing. I think it meets a great need. I've seen firsthand how much confusion and frustration women can face and men too, actually, as they navigate these decisions. My first question for you is, there are a lot of data platforms out there right now that are talking about data sharing and asking me as a patient to donate my data. So, if I am to participate in Cancer IQ, what is the particular advantage for me? What's in it for me where I enter in all my information and donate it to somebody else?
Okay, that's a very, very good question. So Cancer IQ doesn't really seek to replace or duplicate any of the registries that are out there. What we really want to do is make it easier for patients to contribute and participate in these registries. And I'll give a very simple example. Do people remember what it was like to log into things before login through Facebook existed? It was terrible. You had to re-enter your information over and over and over again. We kind of want to be the login through Facebook button for cancer genetics data. For people who are like yourself, that everybody wants to learn from, with a click of a button, you can share your data with these different organizations instead of having to enter it in over and over again. And a lot of this information we've collected up front when you actually went to see your doctor.
Let's actually go to the end here. Yeah, well, I'm sorry, Andrew, did you have a follow-up?
One quick follow-up to that, because I think that's really powerful, but it's also a little bit scary. If we are not educating patients about the way the data is shared, how are you using your platform to actually tell patients what they need to do to share the data? What are you doing to make sure they're going through an informed consent process?
Okay, so that's where partnering, again, has really been to our advantage. We have partnered with John Wilbanks and his team. He gave me, and we've started working together on his portable consent platform. What this will do is make sure that the information or the informed consent process is enabled through video communication or visual communication aids so that patients of any literacy level any level of intelligence understand what they're doing when they donate their data. So we look forward to working with him, and we also look forward to working with more patients to make sure that this consenting process is usable by all.
Okay, let's actually just go to the end here. Esther?
So first, I want to compliment you on a really great presentation, including the sort of the context in which it would work. I recently had a friend with cancer who didn't have the right insurance, and this issue of different outcomes based on geography or access is huge. And so my question is around the fact that it's not just genetics that is going to influence your outcome. And so I'm curious, what kind of data you collect? Do you have APIs to sort of all the existing places? And then what is your business model? Are you selling to hospitals, to insurance companies? How do you get out there into the real world?
Okay. All right, so to address your first question about, genetics is just one area. But one thing that we've done with Cancer IQ is also expand those risk factors to lifestyle risk factors that might increase your chance for getting cancer. Genetics is the most difficult.
Or for not
recovering
from it effectively.
Exactly. So risk management at the end of the day is about being proactive about not getting cancer, but also being proactive about not dying from cancer. So those are the types of data points that we make sure that we collect from patients on a regular basis so that we can understand where you stand on the spectrum and prompt the doctor to act on it. And this is actually a very good place for us to segue to our business model. Now, the actions one takes to prevent cancer are not just a nice recommendation that you go home and you eat, green leafy vegetables. The actions that you most often need to take for people who are at high risk are actual clinical actions. For women who are at high risk of breast cancer, they get surgeries. For people who have other types of cancers that are at risk, they have more aggressive screening programs. These are all clinical services that exist in the hospital that the hospital will benefit from if they funnel patients into those service areas. So we finally found where there's an actual alignment and connection with doing the right thing, which is identifying the risk, and for the hospital, making money off a service that today may be underutilized.
Or the insurance company can save money long term.
Exactly. Or the insurance company can save money by preventing cancer.
I'm actually going to come back to Craig to pick up from here. Did you have any questions?
Just building on that theme of data donation, it's something many of us in the room join you in caring a great deal about. But all I've heard so far was the intake assessment, which is a little bit of self-reported data, and then maybe a diagnostic test result, perhaps getting in there. When you're thinking about data donation, are there other data sources that you envision bringing in or making accessible that the patient can share, say their EMR data, biopsy data, other labs?
Absolutely. So again, part of being embedded in the clinic means that we can capture information that doesn't just come from patients. So with our hospitals being customers, that's where we can capture some of that information. The other source of information is actually through patient surveys and outcomes information that's very valuable. And here's where we actually learned from other programs that have motivated patients to share data. And I'm going to give a shout out to UCSF right now because they have done a very wonderful job at doing this. They have an initiative called the Health eHeart Initiative. I will say I'm a healthy heart patient that loves filling out surveys that are 1 to 2 minutes long, but help contribute to understanding the full context of heart disease. We're going to do that for cancer through Cancer IQ.
All right, well, now that you've buttered up, Ainur, we'll go to you for the last question.
Well, so thank you, because in my notes I wrote relationship to healthy heart or similar, and it's the digital version of the Framingham study, and any of you can go on and log in for free and participate, and it's a good learning experience, especially to reach into other conditions. So I congratulate you. My questions are, as a cancer patient myself and as a care provider, there are, and we built a virtual tumor board because of these portions I bring to it, but the questions I have are, there are things that can be done with the data alone and even some supportive algorithms, but there are many times where we don't have enough evidence. So it's the decision-making process is a combination of understanding the patient and their preferences. That's important. We don't do that well enough. But also understanding the hard data, and then we bring evidence, but we have to bring in expertise and expert opinion where we don't have the evidence to back it up. So to contextualize all of this, I think there still needs to be another layer for when it's not a straight pathway. And I'm curious about your looking for strategic partners around that as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm very happy you asked that question because we have recently signed a partnership with two top academic medical centers who are actually funded to train the next generation of cancer genetics professionals. They have collectively trained about 500 people in cancer genetics. And as part of that training program, they have ongoing support for all of those people who have gone through and gotten accredited. And what they do is they host a monthly case working session that today is moderated by people faxing in pictures of cases that they've seen in the clinic, but will soon be moderated and powered through Cancer IQ. So hopefully, in addition to us providing the hard data that comes from academic publications, we'll be able to test this model of kind of peer support for genetics opinions and make that broadly available to others who join the Cancer IQ network.
All right, well, thank you very much, Feyi, and also to our floating panelist, Andrea. We appreciate the presentation. So next up, our floating panelist is Dana Ball, who represents the patient community with type 1 diabetes. And our next presenter is Harry Gandhi with Medela Health. So if we can give a round to Harry.
Thank you for that introduction. And thank you for all of you being here. It's great to see a standing crowd out here. I'm here to tell you a bit about Medela Health, but before I want to take one step back and talk about preventative medicine, as a general span. So one of the, I think we start at the end of our presentation. Okay, I'll just go on without slides. I think they're out of order. So diabetes is one of those diseases that is not just a disease that you can go out, to the patient community and get a treatment for. You can't go to the hospital and you get some type of procedure done. It's a lifestyle disease, and it's something that hit really close to home, and that's the motivation for starting this. And before I get into too many of the details, I want to tell a story. It's a story about David. David's an avid biker who loves taking his bike out. One hot summer day, as he's cruising through some of the most beautiful trails, he feels slightly dizzy, and he faints in the middle of his ride. Now, this is a condition that can happen to any one of the diabetics or pre-diabetics that suffer from this terrible, terrible condition. And by the way, that wasn't just a story. It's a true event that happened to one of our co-founders' parents, and that's the reason we decided to start Medela Health. So why is diabetes management so hard? It's because current solutions simply aren't good enough. They're invasive, they're discontinuous, and most importantly, they're not efficient and don't provide a closed feedback loop. To solve this problem, we're developing contact lenses that continuously and non-invasively monitor blood glucose levels and transmit the information in real time to a mobile device so patients can better manage their diabetes. And it's not just this. We see this as a platform where we can integrate multiple other biosensors that can detect anywhere from proteins, lipids, and other monosaccharides that give a holistic view of a patient's personality, of a patient's well-being. And that's something that's powerful. We've already heard tons of presentations on how early diagnostics are really, really important. the point is there's been tons of research done on diabetes management, but there haven't been research done on other biomarkers. So the ask here at the end of the day is we need to encourage research in these other areas when it comes to tear film, and as it can be seen, not only a literal view of what's inside the body, but also metaphorically, we can figure out all the other diagnostic elements that are present in tears. At the end of the day, one of the things that we've learned with studying diabetes and diabetic patients over the last year and a half is that they would want to prevent their diseases, and they would want to prevent any negative outcome like a hypoglycemic attack or a hyperglycemic attack before anything serious happens. And that's where we come in, is if your blood glucose is too high or too low, you'll get a push notification before anything serious happens. So to end off, our end goal is to prevent another David from happening. And that's why we make diabetes management seamless. But one day, I'd like to change that line and say we make health monitoring seamless. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Harry. So Dana, we'll start with you. Please introduce yourself as well, and we look forward to your feedback.
Sure. So my name's Dana Ball. I'm a longtime patient advocate in the world of diabetes, specializing in type 1 diabetes. I'm executive director of a program called T1D Exchange, which focuses on improving health outcomes through a clinical care program and accelerating research and development in translation of new devices, treatments, therapies. So this is incredibly interesting to me. So, it is brilliant, the concept, right? Because today people have to use a lancet, stick their finger, check their blood glucose multiple times a day. In the world of blood glucose monitoring has evolved, right? So we have current sensing technologies today that are being used through CGM and a recent Abbott discovery that's a blinded CGM, so patients can wear something much smaller, much more accurate, that's permanently attached to their body and do this in real time, or do this on an ad hoc basis. So if you could do this, it would be remarkable for everyone with diabetes, which leads me to the question of, the concept is to create a lens that could be accurate enough to measure blood glucose in the eye using tears, and then somehow you have transmitting that information in real time to a mobile app. And I'd like to just hear your plan and the strategy of what technology you're going to use to make that happen.
So over the last about 20 years, there's been tremendous growth in nanotechnology and microelectronics. What semiconductors look like 20 years ago, it's vastly different today. And I'll show you a prototype after this presentation is done. I have one in my bag. The way this works is a combination of those two technologies. There's about approximately 5 to 10 times less glucose in the tears compared to blood, and our sensor is able to detect that. As far as the microelectronic and that integration goes, it will communicate to an external dongle, a necklace or something that you wear or clip onto your collar, and that would communicate via Bluetooth to a mobile phone.
And maybe give me an update on what stage and proof of principle, application, studies, or just where is this today?
So far we've built our sensing technologies. We've validated the technology. As far as sensing and microelectronics goes, the next step is scaling up the manufacturing to a state that we want and microsizing it. Right now, our prototypes are slightly bigger than that would fit in a contact lens and are slightly thick. But we're planning on reducing those sizes and fitting into a contact lens by next summer.
And then the test, sorry.
Oh, no, please, Esther.
And I'm guessing you're going towards the data question?
Yeah, and the FDA approval and the testing cycle and so forth.
Yeah, that's one thing that we're working hard on, and that's one of the reasons that we're on here. At the end of the day, we started off as a team of technologists, and we're bringing more and more talent who's on the clinical side, and we're actively seeking for more talent. We have been in touch with some of the regulatory organizations and are going back and forth with them, and have our non-binding meetings scheduled. The next step is to get enough clinical data to support this. We've already gone lab data to support this research.
Please, Einor.
Yeah, so some of my questions are clinical, and it should scare anyone in the room here when one specialist starts trying to talk about another one. But it's like the definition of a double-blind study, since we have bad jokes going, is two orthopods.
I didn't say they were bad jokes. I just said the bar was low.
So what is the definition of a double-blind study? It's two orthopods trying to read an EKG. But I'm going to bring in a little ophthalmology here. In diabetic patients, one of the complications is dry eye. And as the concentration of the tears changes, how does that affect the readings? That's just one of the clinical questions.
Yeah, that's a good question to have. So for someone who doesn't have a clinical background, one of the other things that I should have mentioned is these aren't contact lenses that your tears can only detect glucose when they're at the basal state. If you cry or cut onions, they get diluted, and we have software to correct for that, one. As for dry eyes, we recognize that was one of the issues in sort of the validation and interviewing all the diabetics that we did. One thing that we realized is we had to bring our sensor technology so it can detect very, very small amounts. Today, I can confidently say that our sensor can detect between 2 and 4 microliters, which is plenty even for dry eye patients.
So just to finish on the clinical side, there's a delay in serum glucose to tear glucose of about 10 minutes. So if you're looking at real-time with real-time interventions, are you planning to look at trajectories and trends and work those into your algorithms?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're doing is we're partnering with an already existing diabetes app that's on the market. They collect semi-dynamic and dynamic inputs of patients, such as weight, other physiological factors that factor into that conversion of tear glucose and blood glucose. And it's a relationship that we can readily use. So I should probably correct my statement and say it's a combination of nanotechnology, microelectronics, and data science that makes this possible.
And maybe some clinical science in there?
Yes. Well, yes, of course.
Craig.
So you're clearly entering the space with your eyes wide open.
We definitely see the vision.
But along those lines, I think we've all heard of at least 2 technology giants out there claiming that they will have something similar brought to market. I think Microsoft said it about 3-4 years ago, and Google most recently. Do you have a different approach in terms of the technology, a different vision? Clearly, if it's successful, there's room for competition, but how do you see competing?
So there's 2 ways I can answer this question. I was talking to Dana about this earlier. So one answer is I can give you the technology differences that we're working on or how our sensing technology is different, how our microelectronics are different, and how we do integration is different. But I think I'm going to go with the second answer, which I think is a much more fruitful answer for this room, is that we've seen tons of monopolies and oligopolies in the medical device space. It's time that big tech companies step into this space and small startups so we can innovate at a much faster space. So I can easily say, this is supposed to worry me, but I say it really doesn't. It's a matter of if we can implement this the right way, I think we'll make a very strong case for it. And it's about time that we can bring in this type of competition into this space.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Let's all thank Harry and Dana as well. So, as Faster Cures does in all things medical research, we have hopefully today sped up the iteration and innovation process. We hope all of you got a lot out of this, as well as our entrepreneurs. Before we conclude, I do want to thank our Faster Cures Senior Advisor, Lisa Mitchell, as well as Senior Fellow John Wilbanks, and Faster Cures staff, Samantha Mayberry and Mark Lim. Excellent work in putting this together today. Want to thank all of you for participating and our panelists. We really appreciate the feedback as we speed up the lean startup methodology here at Faster Cures. So thank you very much.